Hello everyone, in this section we will talk about the relevant knowledge of the registered capital of Chinese companies. First of all, you need to understand what registered capital means. There are mainly two meanings. Registered capital is the amount of money that shareholders promise to transfer into the company's bank account. This is what people call the company's operating capital. The company's operation and development requires funds, so the registered capital is the operating capital. Another meaning is that the registered capital also represents the limit of the liability that shareholders promise to bear for the company's debts in the future. The default form of a company is generally a limited liability company. This means that shareholders bear limited liability for the company's debts up to the registered capital. These are the two meanings of registered capital. Next, let me explain some concepts about registered capital. The name shareholder that we often hear is actually usually called contributor or investor when registering a company. Both of these words refer to shareholders. It's just that these people are called investment ratios in terms of shareholding ratios. So the investment ratio is the ratio of the amount of investment of each shareholder to the registered capital of the company. This is called the investment ratio, which is also what people usually call the share ratio. There is another issue that many bosses are concerned about. That is, within what period of time should the registered capital be paid? In China, there are two types of registered capital, the paid-in system and the subscribed-in system. Let me explain them in detail. Starting from 2014, the default system for company registered capital was changed from paid-in system to subscribed-in system. The paid-in system means that you need to deposit an amount equal to the registered capital into the company account before you can start operating the company's business. Before 2014, the default system for registered capital of companies was paid-in capital system. The subscribed-in system means setting a deadline and completing the payment within that deadline. Then this period can be set by yourself, and the time can be set to 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, or even longer. Therefore, under the premise of the subscribed-in system, there is no need to pay all the registered capital at once or even not pay the capital after the operating period expires. However, since China began to implement the on July 1st, 2024, major changes have taken place compared to the previous system. There are mainly 8 relatively important changes. Article 1. Registered capital must be paid in full within 5 years, which is equivalent to re-implementing the old paid-in system. But the difference is that the paid-in system starting on July 1st, 2024 has an additional 5-year grace period compared to the paid-in system before 2014. But this extra 5 years is only for newly established companies. For already established companies, only an additional 3-year transition period will be added. However, the subscribed capital of an established company can be modified within 3 years, increasing the deadline to 5 years. In fact, an additional 5-year transition period is added to the original 3-year period. This means that the actual payment can be completed within 8 years. The registered capital can also be paid in batches. For example, a company's registered capital is 1 million renminbi and the company operator is unable to pay it all at once. Then it can be paid in 10 years with only 100,000 RMB required per year. However, the money paid was not paid to the government or the tax bureau, but was paid into the company's account. This money can be fully used in the company and can be used for all the company's expenses. For example, renting an office or buying office equipment, or even paying employees' salaries can all be paid with this money. If the paid-in period for registered capital expires and you cannot pay the registered capital, but you do not want to cancel the company, then there is only one way: reduce capital. You can reduce the registered capital to an amount you can afford. However, some bosses do not want to reduce their capital because some qualifications require that the registered capital must reach a certain amount. In fact, there is a way to avoid this problem. That is to pay the registered capital with intellectual property, patents, or software copyrights. You only need to find an asset appraisal firm to conduct a value assessment on your intellectual property and then use the assessed value to pay the registered capital. This is also feasible. Therefore, there are actually many ways to solve the problem of registered capital, and there is no need to worry about completing the actual payment within 5 years. So, the most important question is, how much should be filled in the registered capital? There are many more similar questions. Here are a few simple examples. Is it better to write more or less registered capital? Can the registered capital be increased or decreased? What factors should be considered when filling in the registered capital? First of all, more or less registered capital has its own advantages and disadvantages. People usually think that filling in a larger registered capital will highlight the strength of their company. There was an entrepreneur who filled in the registered capital of 10 million when he registered the MCN company. Although he certainly couldn't come up with so much money, he said that if I filled in as much registered capital as possible, it would make the anchors think that this was a large-scale company. To a certain extent, filling in more registered capital will make investors think that this is a strong company, creating an information gap. This is the benefit of filling in more capital. However, filling in more registered capital also means you will face greater responsibilities. Registered capital is the limit of limited liability that shareholders must bear. If your company's registered capital is 10 million, then when you owe 10 million due to poor management of the company, you need to fully repay the 10 million debt. But if your company's registered capital was only 1 million and you owe a debt of 10 million, you only need to repay 1 million. Debts owed by the operating company are only company debts, and shareholders only need to bear limited liability limited by the registered capital. Therefore, from the perspective of risk avoidance, it is best not to fill in too much registered capital for the company. In addition, if you fill in a smaller registered capital, you can increase it at any time if necessary. On the contrary, if you fill in a larger registered capital, you can also reduce it at any time. However, the difficulty of increasing and reducing registered capital is completely different. It is relatively simple to increase the registered capital, but it would be troublesome to reduce the registered capital. There are two difficulties. First, if you want to reduce your capital, you need to go to the tax department for a personal tax assessment, confirm whether you need to pay personal income tax. After shareholders pay a certain amount of personal income tax, they have to go to the Ministry of Industry and Commerce to make a public announcement. The entire announcement period takes at least 45 days, and the entire process may even take 2 months. So, when filling in the registered capital, try to fill in as little as possible, and it will not be too late to increase it when necessary. But what are the situations where you need to increase the registered capital? Here are 2 examples. The first example is when a company with a registered capital of 100,000 yuan wants to enter an online platform. However, this online platform requires that the registered capital of all companies entering the platform must not be less than 1 million yuan, so the company can only increase its registered capital before entering the platform. Moreover, increasing registered capital is very simple and can be completed in 3 days at most. Another example is when a company with the same registered capital of 100,000 yuan is about to introduce a major shareholder who hopes to hold 90% of the shares. There are generally 2 ways to introduce shareholders, namely capital increase and share expansion, and equity transfer. Compared with the other, increasing capital and expanding shares is simpler. When a new shareholder wants to take over 90% of the company's shares, he only needs to increase the company's original registered capital of 100,000 yuan to 1 million yuan. Then the newly added 900,000 yuan in the company's registered capital is the 90% equity held by the new shareholder. This is called capital increase and share expansion. Similarly, if the company's initial registered capital is already 1 million, then introducing a major shareholder with a 90% stake through capital increase and stock expansion can only increase the original company's registered capital from 1 million to 10 million. Then, the registered capital of 10 million does not quite meet the above-mentioned requirement of filling in as little registered capital as possible. Shareholders need to bear limited liability within the registered capital of the company. If you do not want to increase the registered capital too much, but want to introduce new shareholders, then we can only adopt the second method, equity transfer. You can transfer part of the registered capital of shareholder A to shareholder B. Transfer 900,000 yuan of shareholder A's 1 million yuan registered capital to shareholder A. In this way, shareholder B holds 90% of the shares. In this way, there is no need to modify the company's registered capital when transferring equity. However, when carrying out equity transfer procedures, personal income tax needs to be assessed to check whether the company's equity has increased in value. If the assessment result shows that the company's equity has increased in value, an additional 20% personal income tax will be required. Therefore, equity transfer is much more troublesome than capital increase and share expansion. Considering the various developments that the company will face in the future, it is best to fill in as little registered capital as possible. The procedure for increasing capital is relatively easy. When the company needs to introduce shareholders, it can increase the registered capital at any time. There is another more important question. Many entrepreneurs do not know what factors should be considered when filling in the registered capital. Mainly, consider three aspects. First, consider the level of the region to which the company belongs. When shareholders name the company name will include a region name. This region name can be the name of the district or county or the city or province. It may not even include any region name, then it is equivalent to a national company. The registered capital requirements are different for companies at different regional levels. There are usually no special requirements at the county level. Except for some special cities, there are no special requirements at the city level. But usually when the company's region reaches the provincial level, there will be certain requirements for the company's registered capital. For example, a company that starts with the name of Jiangsu Province is required to have a registered capital of no less than 10 million before it can be named. However, to be a national company whose company name does not contain the name of the region, the registered capital is even required to be at least 50 million yuan. So, when determining the company's registered capital, you first need to determine the regional level to which the company belongs. The amount of a company's registered capital will also change according to the needs of the company's business development. For example, when entering a certain network platform, the registered capital is required to be no less than 1 million. In some special cases, the company will need to apply for some industry licenses. And these industry licenses will have certain requirements for the company's registered capital. So, when determining the registered capital, we must check the requirements of some industry licenses and confirm whether the operating company needs to apply for these qualifications. Okay, the above are some reference suggestions about the company's registered capital. The registered capital of an enterprise can be increased or decreased. If you are still not sure how much the registered capital of an enterprise should be filled in, then fill in as little as possible. Thank you for watching. See you next time.